Howdy folks, and welcome to RandomJank. Now, last week I was talking about the core set and all the rules changes that are going to be coming up, and the one thing I didn't mention is that, well, there's something else that's big that's happening with that. See, every single year when Wizards decides to put out another set of releases, not just the core set, but the next block, the oldest block actually gets kicked out. So for the next year or so, Innistrad is not going to be the norm anymore. And I think that's a shame because it's actually one of my favorite sets, you know, tied with Tempest, the one I started with, and that's all nostalgia stuff. Now today, to kind of honor the set that's going to be getting kicked out in the next 3 months, I decided to list the top 5 favorite cards of mine for fun of Innistrad. Now, this is not the top 5 best cards, this is just my top 5 favorites. So, let's get started. Number 5. Army of the Damned. Now this is a 3 black, 5 generic casting cost sorcery that puts 13 2/2 zombies on the field. Under normal circumstances, this is a really expensive spell that, well, quite frankly, you're never going to be able to cast in a normal game. My personal favorite way of playing is limited, however, where the games have a tendency to run a little bit longer and your mana base gets a little bit wider before you actually manage to finish the game. In some respects, this is actually a nice big bomb. I love the fact that this thing puts out 13 zombies because, well, 13 is such an unlucky number. And to top it all off, you actually get a flashback on it as well for a total of 26 if you're lucky enough to get the extra mana that you're going to need to be able to cast this thing. Number 4, Trepanation Blade. Now, interesting little bit of trivia, when this set was first being planned and they were coming up with all the names for the cards, this one actually started out as Chainsaw. Now imagine any creature in the world with this massive chainsaw that's just grinding into somebody, and it's just amazing. Another interesting thing about this card is that it uses a mechanic that actually pops up later on in Ravnica, well, Ravnica block anyways. It was supposed to be the Dimir keyword, grind, where you just keep milling your opponent until they hit a land. The fact that they put it on a card a set earlier, and it's a card that I've been using a lot of times in any mill deck that I've made, puts this at number 4. Number 3. Mayor of Avva. Now, this card is one of the flip cards that they decided to bring out with this new set. It was one side had one ability, and then if you didn't cast any spells, or if your opponent didn't cast any spells, the card would flip over. Something that they want to introduce for the werewolf tribal theme that they were going for with this set. I thought the mechanic was actually really cool, and the fact that this thing is a human that buffs up other humans, and human is a huge tribal theme in the entire block, if not the entire game, it's one of my favorite cards to use even in competitive decks. And all the competitive decks want to buff up their humans because humans is just a really fast tribal race to be using in the game right now. Number 2, Ambush Viper. Now, look at that casting cost. It's 1 generic and 1 green. It pretty much matches up entirely with Doom Blade. This is the green Doom Blade. There's nothing wrong with that. It is a creature, but it comes out with flash. You can cast it any time that you can cast an instance. And I love being able to trick my opponents into attacking me with everything, and they have that big creature out and I just ambush viper it to death. It's not quite as good as a Doom Blade in the fact that you do need to have some kind of creature theme going on. And if they have a way of tapping down your creatures before they come out, like with Blind Obedience, not as useful as just a normal instant spell, but it still makes it to this list. And number 1 should come as no surprise to anybody, because anytime I've mentioned a blue deck in the first season, or anytime I plan on making a human-themed deck, this is the number 1 card that I include 4 of. Invisible Stalker. The most broken card out of the set, arguably. It's a 1/1 unblockable hexproof creature in a color that can protect this under any circumstances because blue has all the counter spells and 99% of the control magic. This thing is just an absolute beast. You put this thing with a Trepanation Blade and your opponent is just going to get milled until they get hit down to 20. You put a Butcher's Cleaver on this, and what ends up happening is you keep gaining life, and they can't stop you from being able to punch in with some damage. Now, I know I said that this is just a list of fun cards, but this is one of the cards that's used in a lot of competitive decks as well because it's next to impossible to deal with without big, explosive board wipe stuff, which then sets your opponent back, which is the entire point of playing this game. You want to eliminate your opponent. And Invisible Stalker does a very good job at doing exactly that. Alright, so that was my top 5 of Innistrad, but don't get me wrong, there was a ton of fun cards that was in this set. Like I said, it's one of my favorite sets next to Tempest, just for all the flavor and storyline purposes, and the fact that there was a lot of really fun cards to use. Now, if you want to hear more about what I think about cards that didn't quite make the list, I actually have a blog right now where I talk about the episodes on Tuesdays, so the link is going to be down below. There's a few other cards that I want to talk about, and you know, the reasons why they didn't quite make it to this list. If you like these videos, be sure to subscribe and like, share it with all your friends, and I will see you next week. Oh no, look, I get it. It's like 2/3 of an inch. That's, all of my ex-girlfriends will say that's a lot.
You're on.
Oh crap. And the one thing I didn't mention is the fact that when a new core set comes out, the old stuff actually blocks out about 3 months later. Theros is going to be coming out